Welcome back. So the Social Development Department says 50 non-profit organizations in South Africa are being investigated for alleged terror funding and money laundering. It follows a Financial Action Task Force recommendation which classified South Africa as a medium-risk country. Now, South Africa is trying to claw its way out of greylisting by October this year. We are joined by Social Development Deputy Director General Peter Netshipale this evening for more on this. Mr. Netshipale, good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So this is interesting. 50 NPOs are being investigated by authorities. Talk to me about how you identified the 50 and what it was that in their activities has raised the concern that there may be some terror financing.
Thank you very much for the time. Actually, you speaking to Mr. Peter Netshipale, the Acting Director General of the Department of Social Development.
Got you.
Yeah. I think there was some little bit of a misrepresentation. There could be more than what we are talking about. What we were dealing with as a department in preparation for us to move out of the grey listing, which was Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday workshop in Captain Park, was the issue where, as a country, you know very well that we are affiliated to FATF, which is the body that is responsible to ensure anti-money laundering and terror financing. And as a department, we are responsible for the registration of NPOs. That's why, as part and parcel of that, with other regulators like SARS, SAPS, National Treasury, FIC, Masters of High Court, we were there together. The purpose of our workshop was, one of the recommendation of FATF, recommendation 8, relates to a country need to make sure that it supervises its NPOs. So we don't have 50 NPOs that we are looking after. In actual fact, what we are doing is to educate all NPOs so that none of the NPOs that is registered in the country is involved in money laundering and terrorism. We have got, as a department, over 280,000 NPO registered. So with that in mind, the FATF recommendation have identified one of us, the NPOs, they are at risk of money laundering and terror financing. And as such, we were required that we must develop a risk assessment guideline or framework, that we must talk to all NPOs, educate them so that they should not be found wanting. That risk assessment framework identify a number of NPOs that could be regarded as non-compliant. But we haven't identified those as a country, as we are moderate. But in order to prevent it, in order to make sure that we move out of grey listing, one of the actions is for the government of South Africa, Department of Social Development, and other intergovernmental departments to make sure that we educate NPOs. We called networking organizations that has representatives. That risk assessment framework, it has got an area and an approach on how we need to identify those. Once we find them, which is not going to be social development who find them, the intelligence, the SAPS, and other regulatory institution will investigate, and those people will be blacklisted or they are going to be arrested for that. But for now, it is to prepare all NPOs in the country to be aware and to educate their members so that they should not involve in money laundering.
Yeah, but so this is what I'm trying to get to. So you say that you ran a risk assessment process, and in that you found that a number of these NPOs were non-compliant. What was it that rendered them, in your view, non-compliant? And so can that non-compliance then in some way, shape or form link them to terror financing and certainly money laundering.
No. I think there was some misquoting there in terms of the numbers. What will the risk assessment will do at the end will enables us to identify those NPOs that could be at risk of money laundering. There are criteria there that when you look at it, you will say, if you look at all those criteria that are listed, there will be NPOs, of course, that meet the standard, which thereafter we will be able to then identify them. The FATF requires us as a department to supervise them in terms of what they need to do, and to make sure that we report this to the necessary authority. In actual fact, once we run the risk assessment for NPOs, we'll be able to identify those who are at risk.
Okay.
As of now,
Yes.
South Africa is there's no NPOs that have been identified who are at risk, who are at risk of money laundering per se. It is we are beginning to make sure that we educate the NPOs in the country. Remember, our NPOs in this country that do a lot of work. They are very good in rendering services, variety of services that we render in the country. And as a department also, we do a lot of this. So we are, as a department, making sure that every NPO that we have are trained or informed about those risks.
Okay. So just to be clear, and I know, I might sound like I'm beating a dead horse here,
Yeah.
DG, because this is, and I think this clarity is important because the grey listing has massive, long-standing implications for our economy and our own economic stability. And so where you do have fears that NPOs are, used to launder money or to fund terror, I mean, the one is bad enough. So again, finally, out of the 280,000 registered NPOs, can you as DSD say that none of those you fear are financing terror or being used as money laundering with the information that you have? So I'm looking for that clarification in one singular thought, if you will.
Yeah, no, I think you wouldn't go to that level because we haven't applied all. What we are trying to do currently is to do a preventative approach where we educate our NPOs because we were fingered out that in the findings it says you didn't have a risk assessment framework. Yes. You didn't use criteria to look at all the NPOs. Yes. Therefore, as part and parcel of those, the DCPI and also the ICU and intelligence were unable to use any criteria. Now that we have got a criteria, we need then to educate all of them. Then we can begin to look at which one meets the requirements, which one will be at risk, highest risk, higher risk, medium risk, and low risk. That is what we are going to do. We haven't found any, but we can't say there's no one that fit the requirement. We haven't gone at that level.
Okay. And will we know for certain by June, when we do have the deadline for us to claw our way out of grey listing by October? I mean, it's already March. It's easy to think that, it's still early on in the year, but we're very well closing the first quarter of the year already.
Yeah, you will be able to. I think you need to follow up. This is the beginning, and I think as necessary, you will be informed because this is paramount. One of the requirements that we are supposed to do, which makes us to be grey listed, not only us, is that we didn't even begin to have a criteria to do that. Now that we have got this, we will begin to look at which one can be used for money laundering. We will also identify, we will be able to tell you these NPOs are at high risk without fear or favor of anything. And that involves SAPS and other people to look at those. It also involves us the law requires us to scrutinize them and supervise them. Last year, when we were preparing for this, we have to amend the NPO Act with the General Law Amendment Act. That also requires us to supervise and change how the NPOs need to be registered and the members of those to be put under scrutiny before they register.
Yeah.
In other words, if they say you are a member, we will come and say, no, where do you stay? What? All those things. So we put the law first. We then develop the tools for evaluation. Then we are now at a level where few months to come, we'll be able to identify the risk NPOs that we have, and we will announce that as required by FATF.
Okay, so there's still the work to be done of establishing the tools of evaluation, which is quite interesting. I'm keen to hear, though, what we, I suppose, characterize as terror financing. So what would be the signs within an organization that say, well, there's a red flag right there?
Yeah, the terror financing meaning, literally, it means that an NPO or a person is funded to recruit people for terrorism. Simple as that. Simple, straightforward. Or an NPO receives money, millions, into their account, and they are told this money must be given to Newzroom Afrika.
Yeah.
Without, you get the money, it comes from somewhere. And as an NPO, you are required, no, give it to Channel 45 without following the procedures.
Okay.
And it involves a lot because the Reserve Bank will look at it, Financial Intelligence Commission, FIC will see it, and SARS will look at whether that's what you mean. That in other countries that we visited, that we have gone through, there are such NPOs that have been found to have done that. Yes.
So much of
And
the
that's why.
work, right, so
Yes.
much of the work, my understanding from our conversation then is the work really to identify how NPOs disseminate their resources and funds and procedurally what happens there. So that being the part that's really important. So it's about the transparency and accountability, correct?
It's transparency, accountability, and responsibility, and it also it involves now that now that we change the act,
Yeah.
there is a requirement when we register to put some things into the registration. You will immediately know when you register. This one. If you pass that stage, you will also have the criteria that you must look at, and when you find that this have got that, we need to report to to intelligence and others so that they can look at these NPOs. It's required that we must supervise those NPOs from the registration side and also from the monitoring side. In other words, the monitoring of those NPOs will be much more rigorous than just an NPO which is in a small village, doing work in a small village.
Okay. All right. I think this is important clarity that you have given us, and we really do appreciate the time that you've given us this evening. Mr. Peter Netshipale there, who is the Acting Director General at...
Director General, yes.
I got it. Acting Director General at the Department of Social Development, speaking to us this evening. All right.